Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. Today I have with me Carly Bischoff. Carly is a married mum of two beautiful girls, is a paramedic of 10 years, has completed her yoga teacher training, is currently studying counselling at uni, and generally just shares so much on her social feeds around her own mental health struggles and journey and her own personal experiences. And I'm really grateful to have you here with me, Carly, because you are so passionate about people and what makes them tick and what makes them do and say and act the way that they do. And you share a lot about that, especially as an advocate for those who are less fortunate than yourself, um, and bringing in elements of social justice and even shadow work where we might step into spiritual bypass and all of those things. So there's so much of interest to me about what you have to share and what you have to say. So I'm really grateful for you to come on here and
Thank
share a
you
little bit more.
so much. I'm so happy to be here, and it's so lovely to chat to you and meet you finally
Yeah,
after we've
finally.
been friends for quite a while. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me. I
No,
appreciate
my pleasure. Um, I guess like because there's so many areas that we could start, right? But like I guess it's sort of with social media, you use that as a way to share what's on your mind and what you're working through personally, and again as a voice for those who may not have as loud as a voice or as much of an audience or as an equal as an audience as well to hear them. So I guess to start with, like, what does it mean to you to use your voice?
So I suppose first of all, I'm really just fumbling it through it, just like anyone else. My thoughts that I share on there are just coming as they come to me, and kind of as I, do my own research and reading and that kind of thing. And social media has been a really great tool for me to kind of harness some of the things I'm passionate about and share them with others. And yeah, a few things about me. Like I have been a paramedic for 10 years. So I work with a lot of different types of people, and I see a lot of different types of people. And I have most recently, since becoming a mum, kind of got more into a bit of spirituality, and just to find a bit more substance and a bit more connection. And I just find that I'm just trying to bring the two together, and that's kind of what I'm off sharing, like yeah, um, spirituality, and yeah,
It's
it
almost like still living in the real world as well and finding the balance.
yeah, it really
Yeah.
is. I I'm passionate about being the best that I can be,
Mm.
and I don't always get it right. But then sharing that with others, and if it resonates, that's great.
Yeah. Was there like a turning point for you when you realized this was an area that you wanted to advocate more actively for in terms of social justice or in terms of even mental health and sharing your journey? Like what was your process in
So
getting to this point?
I I had a what you'd say mental breakdown, or I was quite unwell in 2016, and I felt like I became that way because I wasn't listening to myself and I was too busy serving others. Um, and as a mum, it's quite easy to do.
Yeah.
And so I ended up really unwell. I was in a mental health ward, and I feel like sharing that isn't such a big deal to me. Like, it doesn't feel like a big deal, and that's just part of my journey and just part of how I've evolved. And I just think that mental health is important to me because I've witnessed it so much within my work, but also I've had personal experience in it as well, and dealing with it, and knowing that what works for one doesn't work for everyone. And it's a very it's a fascinating area for me, for my own personal benefit. But then when I see other people struggling, it's something that I am passionate about. So yeah.
Yeah, it was like it's very much through your lived experience of understanding
Absolutely.
like, oh, this was my experience, but also the opportunity to see the diversity and how it can show up as well, and in different people, and the reasons why it shows up and the reasons why it might show up.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Mm.
some of the things I share on my Instagram, I'm almost like calling myself out because I have been that person, or I have done those things, but they didn't particularly sit well with me at the time. And so I've found my own words for them through connecting with others on social media, and I'm able to kind of share my point of view. Yeah, and I don't think it's an ever evolving thing.
Mm.
Like I don't know if we'll ever get it right, but we can only try. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's changing the conversation and what it means as well, which can be challenging and it can be uncomfortable and it can be confronting for many people too. Like a lot of the things you share are really important topics around social justice. So, Indigenous rights and trans rights and gay rights, and all of, like, that's not all that you share, but that's just a smattering of what you do. And they definitely are topics that make you think differently, and by you I mean the royal you, but like it makes people think differently about what might they might have been conditioned into thinking, or um, just taught to think growing up. And sometimes that change in how we inherently and automatically think is hell confronting and so uncomfortable. um, have you found what have you found in that process, like both for yourself but
So
also for
yeah,
people?
I'm challenging myself first of all. Like
Yeah.
I suppose because I have uh, dealt with a lot of different people, including all those people that you've just mentioned there, all those minority groups or marginalised groups. And I see them for people that I just can't understand or compute how anyone could be against rights of the marginalised, or
Mm.
yeah. And so I am sharing it in real time when I'm confronting it with myself.
Yeah.
And although it's challenging, I feel like that's where the work is. When you feel that, oh, hang on, maybe this doesn't feel right, hang on, let me just sit with that a little bit. And then realizing, well, hey, we are all people,
Mm.
and we all deserve a voice and we all deserve rights. And there are some people in our community that have been treated unfairly and don't deserve that. And so yeah, I'm just trying to highlight that. Yeah, as I said,
Mm.
just really in real time, I'm doing it. I'm undoing all these conditioning and belief, all while I'm working through it on Instagram. And I'm journaling, and I'm talking
Yeah.
with close friends and family about it, and that kind of stuff. So that is the process for me, and it's really it's been. I haven't had anyone say that they disagree with me. Well, I've had a couple actually, but most of the time, people are really, although they are triggered, they are really grateful for what I bring to social media.
Mm.
I appreciate that, because sometimes it can feel quite lonely. Some of the things I share, and not everyone is particularly supportive, or it just becomes a little bit like crickets sometimes. So when people do reach out to me and they tell me that they appreciate what I share, it means a lot. It really does mean a lot, that I'm not alone in having these thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for sharing also that, like, that it is your own process and that you are confronting it within yourself as well, because I think from what I can see, that is the challenge in the most part for people when they're presented with a differing way of thinking about something, and it feels uncomfortable. It's that immediate, like, oh, but no, I don't agree, without actually sitting with it. And you're right, like that is exactly where the work is. I have a lot of work to do, that, like, there for myself as well. And for
We all
like,
do. I think we all do.
yeah.
And I don't think the work ever ends. I think that's the
No.
thing. Like, it's a constant reassessment all right, how am I sitting with this? Okay, yep. And then you might get some more new information, and it's just a constant reassessment and moving forward, and finding what's true for you. I think, like, what I think and what I view may not be true for everyone, and that's okay. You know, we all have our own personal truths, and that process of sitting with it and kind of pondering it, journaling over it, discussing it with others really allows me, like, I'll be in the shower and I'll be like, oh, that's it. I've got this. That's exactly what I need, you know, and you know, who doesn't have shower thoughts?
I love shower thoughts, are my favorite.
And so I have to get out of the shower quickly and write something down before I forget. But yeah, it's just, I enjoy that process, that digging deep within myself to find, like, it's really about like unconscious biases and that kind of stuff. And you know, what we have been taught growing up, or on a family level, social level, society level, you know, culturally, national level, just to really question those unconscious beliefs and sit with it and find out, is this really for me? Is this really what I think? Rather than just accepting it, is this really what I think? So yeah,
that's it. Hey, and it's the curiosity of, is this really for me, also from the mental health perspective, instead of it being your own guilt and shame trip as well, because I feel like that can be like the black hole that people see it will go into. If they start to do the work, they're like, well, I just will start to feel too guilty or too ashamed of whatever. And I for me personally, I feel like that's the opposite of what it should be, you know, and you're not helping anyone by feeling like all the heavy guilt and shame, because it's such, you know, it's such an unuseful feeling to have, even for the cause, right? So it's
a overused emotion, and it's been conditioned we've been conditioned to feel shame over things we don't really need to be shameful about. And I feel like recognizing, hey, I feel shame. Is it really shame, or is it something else? Sitting with that and going, well, I shouldn't feel shame, like challenging up my own thoughts. I shouldn't feel shame over eating that piece of cake. Why am I feeling shame over eating that piece of cake? You know? And so challenging that, sitting with that and going, all right, well, why am I feeling shame? And then what should I be feeling? Or what do I really feel? You know, and the fact is, I enjoy eating that cake. It brings pleasure, and, you know, I'm enjoying it with my family. That's love and that's connection. And I'm not going to feel guilty about that. And so it's just one by one changing every single one, isn't it? And it's a process, and it's an active process. Kind of, it takes kind of a lot of mental strength. So it's not something everyone has the capacity to do, and that's okay too.
Yeah, right. It's I feel like, especially this year, you know, it started out as bushfires and then it turned into a fucking pandemic, and then it was, you know, like one thing after another after another after another, collectively, as well as all of the, you know, things that still tick along anyway. I've learned this year, and it started with the bushfires for me, where I was like, right, I feel big things, and that's, you know, good, sure, I'm doing what I can. But it was almost like, for me at that stage, I went through the conscious realization of, I can't stop my work though, just, you know, not just because, but I can't stop my work because of this disaster going on, because if I stop my work, then I can't help anyway. You know, so it was like, okay, what can I do, in the sense of, what can I do for me in the way that creates strength within myself, so that I am in a position to actually help? Because if I'm not helping me, I'm useless to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And it can get really hard. Like, you can get caught up in the, you know, I'm like, for me, I have a house, I have a job. I can get caught up in the, you know, I feel guilty almost. You know, but that doesn't serve anyone. You know, I owe it to myself and my peers to work on myself, so then I can bring what I need to bring and share what I need to share. But yeah, this year has been the most hectic. Um, you're not alone in those feelings, I can tell you.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of people that are struggling to the brink. And I think realizing that not everyone has the same ability, or like not everyone has a roof over their head, a job, a lot of people have a lot of stresses going on, and realizing that yeah, this is a really tough year, and yeah, it's the same for a lot of people at the moment.
Yeah, like collectively our windows of tolerances are so much smaller than they
Yeah.
have ever been in, this lifetime. And and even things like comparative trauma,
Mm.
there's such a fine line where people are, like one-upping trauma, which isn't, I don't feel is healthy. But then there's also the comparative trauma of dismissing, and I think this is where the shadow work comes in as well, of like dismissing how you are feeling
Mm.
because, oh, someone else has it so much worse. You
Mm.
can still acknowledge that, but also acknowledge this, and that's how you heal and that's how you help. Like,
Exactly, it's
it's,
like holding space for two truths.
yes.
I am uh, I don't have to feel, yeah, it's really hard for me, but yeah, I can't, I have to look after myself, so then
Hmm.
what I provide will be the best for me and my family, and then that will hopefully have a ripple effect. um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's,
really love how you put that, actually, because it's holding space for two truths.
yeah,
Because they can both exist at the same time. And from what I see, that's where a lot of people struggle, is they
yeah,
feel like, well, if I'm going to focus on these social justice issues, which deserve focus and deserve attention, absolutely, then like it's almost like it's the one or the other.
they're not
And I
mutually
only,
exclusive. You can
yeah.
have two different ends of the spectrum at the same
Mm,
time. And yeah, I find with myself, what I've had to do within my own personal journey is get to know really and articulate um, some of the emotions within myself. And I
mm,
don't think that I was ever told kind of growing up. And I come from the, don't cry, all that kind of stuff. It, that's just the way it was back then. But I feel like there's a bit of reparenting to myself to get to know, to articulate my own emotions and to be okay with feeling the whole spectrum of them. Not just striving for happiness, but also sitting with that fear or that guilt or that grief, and sitting with it and going, hey, this is totally normal. It's not going to last forever.
mm.
Something happened. You can feel that and move through it. And so I think that whole moving through emotions has been a really big step for me this year, because there has been so many big emotions going on, so many.
Oh, so many. And yeah, and it can be, you're right, like it can also be really easy to feel like, this is gonna be it forever. This is how I'm gonna feel forever. And like my teacher, she uses this quote. She's one of my closest friends now, but she uses this quote often of like, this too shall pass. Like, this too shall pass. Like, all of it, you're moving through all of it. It's just
Oh,
when you're in it.
I have so many mantras that I
Mm,
rely on in times of trouble, and that's definitely one of them. This is not going to last forever, this is going
mm,
to pass. And yeah, I know, because historically for me, when I was unwell, I would be really scared of those sadness, anger, because I thought that I might go down the rabbit hole and fall back unwell again. And so learning for me that just because I am feeling these emotions doesn't mean that I'm falling apart.
mm.
It just means that I'm human, you know. And
Right.
I think we try and bypass a lot of that, because happiness is the goal. But the reality is we're human, and the goal is to experience all the emotions safely and comfortably as we can. It's kind of like riding the wave, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and being able to do that as safely or as comfortable as possible. It's not always easy, and it does take practice. And I'm still every day, you know, it's just one of those ongoing practices for me.
Yeah, definitely. It's I actually want to bring in, because you share a little bit about this and it's relevant to this, is when, you know, the old, like, I don't know, it's not old advice, but there's common advice that actually is really spiritual bypass, and really, you know, like, gets people to just bypass how they're feeling. It's almost like positive thinking. I remember, like, years ago, I caught up in that, because I'm like, well, yeah, like, I'm stubborn, and I've always been stubborn enough to believe that, like, you know, it has to work out, because, like, there's, you know, what else am I going to do, kind of thing. And I still am okay with that part. But then, you know, obviously the idea of positive thinking got, like, latched onto that. And then I was just like, oh, let's just be positive all the time. And then I wasn't addressing how I felt until it all piled on too much. And then I did. So, you know, like, there's things that are like their intention is to be helpful, but isn't, in when it comes to how, like, actually functioning.
Yeah.
So have you have you found, like,
Quite
many
right.
things like that? Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when I became a mum, it was really hard. One of the hardest things I ever did. And I struggled to find, like, I had close friends that I spoke to, but I struggled to find anyone who I could relate to. And I went to all the mothers groups, and I did all the things. And then I went to find, like, I thought, oh, maybe I did yoga teacher training, and moved into all these kind of spiritual groups. And what I found is that no one really wanted to talk about the hard stuff. No one really wanted to go there, because that would be kind of lowering the vibration, or, you know, giving energy to negative thought patterns and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, dude, this is my life. Like, how can that be bad? It couldn't reconcile it. And when, you know, I got into social media, and I realized this thing called toxic positivity, and I
Great.
that is it. Like, social media has given me so many words for what I'm thinking, thankfully. And yeah, toxic positivity. And I was thinking, this is it. Like, people are just bypassing the reality of life in this hope, and it works for those who don't have to deal with so many kind of, if they're privileged and they've got all of their needs met, then that works. Thinking positive is a great tool, and I use it in my life. Like, it's a great tool. But when it gets overused to the point of bypassing the realities of our life, I just wonder, well, I think that it's doing more harm than good, because how are we moving through those struggles if we're just bypassing it by, you know, thinking positive? And so yeah, when I realized that, I was like, all right, well, this is when I started to let in and acknowledge and sit with some of those heavier feelings. And lo and behold, and I'm not saying it will work for everyone, but lo and behold, those feelings shifted, you know, because I sat with them and I felt them and I journaled about them, and I realized they're nothing to be afraid of.
I liken them to, like, a small child, and I'll often tell, like, clients and students this. You know, I couldn't count the amount of times I've used this as the example. Is like, it's like a small child, and, like, who wants your attention, and the more that you ignore it, the more that you kind of, like, push it away, or, like, you know, like, don't pay any attention to it, the louder it gets, because it still wants your attention.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And then as soon as you're like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Let's move
And then
to
they, like, toddle off. Like, you know, it's like, oh,
it's
great.
funny you bring in children, because some of the biggest lessons I've learned is through my children. And I wanted to be able to hold space for their big emotions. But what I found within myself is that I absolutely had no tolerance for them, you know, had no tolerance for their big emotions. And so I had to do the work within myself to be able to regulate my own nervous system, to then hold space for a 2-year-old tantruming because she doesn't have the right plate, and realize that she is 2, and I don't need to get angry at her because of that, because
She is too.
and she is 2, and she actually doesn't know, and she doesn't have the ability to regulate her own emotions. And so letting her cry, letting her scream, and not being the mum that I was, which was, I couldn't deal with this, stop crying, stop, that it's too much for me. And so so dealing with my own just really helped me with my parenting, and holding space for their challenging emotions. I don't always get it right because it can be quite challenging.
Well, I mean, that's actually, honestly, that's my biggest fear about parenting is like when I would get to the point of overwhelm, because I get to that point sometimes just with people now, like, and it's not even for a bad reason. It's just more like, oh, I just need space. So of course that kind of work would help, because it's not just tolerance, it's also patience with perspective. And it's
Yeah,
not patience seeing the same perspective, it's really the perspective, like you just said, of like, she's 2.
yeah,
Like she can't,
yeah.
her brain can't regulate her emotions yet. Like that's just
She's not
development.
doing it to annoy me. I think that was the other.
Yeah.
But she's not
Yeah.
out to get me. She's not out to
Mm.
make me angry. She's 2, and she's definitely challenging. But yeah, having that perspective, like you said, really offers some patience. From
Yeah.
yeah, so
Do you
uh,
find that that's enriched your relationships with your daughters?
absolutely, the connection that comes from honoring all of their emotions is by far one of the most rewarding parenting strategies. I say strategies because it's a work in progress for me, and
Mm.
um, you know, I'm trying to get my husband on board, and he's great. He is fantastic, and he's doing so great with them. And so yeah, it always is a work in progress. But yeah, the connection that comes from um, honoring them and
Mm.
where they are, and I feel that that lays the groundwork for them wanting to come to me. um, like my 7-year-old, when she's having trouble at school, she may not be quite forthcoming with, but I know something's up, and I just wait, and then it comes, and and
Yeah.
it's just about having that that connection, and that comes through really um, yeah, just honoring each other. And they are little people. They've been on this earth a fraction of what we have. They don't have the insight or the knowledge, that we've got. And so just remembering that constantly,
Mm.
and explaining everything, like to a point of like, why, to the point where you're like, I can't say anything else. Like, but explaining it really helps. Even with my 2-year-old, you explain everything. It takes time and effort, but when you explain things, it just something happens, and it's almost like not even the words, but the connection that you're giving them
Yeah.
is enough to satiate them, and they're like, all right, okay, so, and
Yeah. Off
so
I go.
yeah, yeah, and it takes practice, but in the long term, it's so much more beneficial. It really is.
Mm.
Yeah, parenting is
Yeah.
the most challenging thing I've ever done.
Yeah,
Mm.
I can only imagine. Like, I've had those moments with, like, I'm an auntie. I've been an auntie since I was 16, so I feel like that's just like inherently a part of who I am now. But even having those moments with like all of my nieces and nephews, of different moments, especially as I grow, of like just being able to see a little differently about their development. And I love them dearly, and I always have, but it is like the element of just that different perspective of being able to almost see their learning as they go, and they're like, their little sparks of like, oh, that. And the more that I am able to show up and pay witness to that for them, but like as their auntie, or also like you were saying, like give them that space of recognition and of explaining, but without dictating
Mm.
and like what the world should be. It's like, well, actually, like encouraging them to think for themselves in the way of like, oh, well, like, can you imagine how it would feel if you were treated this way? That kind of thing has been really powerful, because you're right, it feels like it's built up that connection between us in this really subtle way of like, there's this trust building that they know that even though I'm not their parent, they know that there's another safe adult that they can go to.
We find we are really passionate about extended family. It's really important to us for the kids to know that they are loved by people other than us, and so we have a great extended family that we that they often visit and are supported by. And we have our own ways on parenting, and that's not always the way that extended family do that, but they know that this is a safe space, as in if anything happens that they're not happy with extended family or even friends or whatever, they come back and they're quite happy to share that. And I think that's important to build that, like you said, that connection, so it is a safe space. So if my 7-year-old goes off to school and something happens, that she does feel comfortable enough to come back. And I want to try and build that early on, so then when we get to the teenage years, my hope is that they will come to us, and they would, nothing is, I would rather them come to me with a lie and believe them than not believe them straight up, because I think believing them really does create that trust. It's like lived experience. When we tell others that what happened to them didn't happen that way, or that's
we minimize their
and I think it's so important to bring that over to parenting. Like, my 2-year-old will tell me some awful lies, not awful, but some very awful.
As a 2-year-old, for sure.
And I'll be quite happy to believe her. And then maybe go, are you sure that happened that way? Because I want her to know that she has a safe space within me, and that I believe her. And I'm that will carry on into up into teenage years.
To me, like, as a former child myself, that feels safe. Just that idea makes me feel like, it's like, that's a safe space. That's a safe, like, it's the non-judgment in who you are as you're figuring out who you are as well. And I think that could really pay well for people even as adults, because we're still growing, right? Absolutely. It's almost like, let people figure out who they are and give them the grace of that. Like, it's also like cancel culture. I was having a conversation earlier today about it, where it's like things that people have said 10 years ago are being held against the person that they are in this moment. And while, depends on what it is, if it's awful, awful, then maybe it's still an issue. But if it's just something that they hadn't learned and understood yet.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've done some terrible things in my past, that I think it's all about the way in which the person who gets cancelled or gets, it says, hey, look, what I did was wrong. And, and that was me then. Look, and this is how far I've come. If someone, it's all in the way that people handle it in the present moment, I think is really important.
So that.
Having a safe space is important for all personal work, all personal growth work, spiritual work, or, and remembering that not everybody has a safe space, that a lot of people are dealing with within their own lives where they aren't feeling safe and they don't have that. And I think just acknowledging that is really important for a lot of people at the moment, with everything going on in the world, that not everyone has a safe space.
Yeah, and like that is a really good point as well, because and I've definitely, done this in the past and probably at times and still present as well, of like when we expect the same thing of other people as far as, as far as that level of standard of growth and learning and shifting and whatever it is, that it is forgetting, like, they need, like, people humans need to feel safe in order to explore different things. Like, even for me, and this is like at the lower end of the unsafe scale, like at the, the sort of the okay-ish still. Like, I was in a living situation last year and at the beginning of this year that was safe. Like, I was physically safe, but it was just like I had to have my mental guard up. So there was something in me that didn't feel safe, like mentally, from like psychological kind of
Yeah.
elements. And like, just even reflecting on how I handled some things, like, and I had a big period of growth during that time anyway, like within myself, but how I also handled, like mentally handled, a lot of things, and how I just misspoke, or like brought up things that were irrelevant to friends at the wrong time when they were, like in the midst of family crisis. And I was just like, oh, by the way, this, and I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Like, it's also, I think it's giving, like, it probably goes back to the reflection of, like, if you're holding that sort of stuff against yourself as well from what you've done in the past, it's like, it's looking at that and going, well, was I doing the best that I could with what I knew at the time and given the space that I
Yeah,
had?
giving yourself some self compassion, and I think that has been a big lesson for me this year, is like giving yourself some grace and self compassion,
Mm-hmm.
and like in particular, like in that particular instance, realizing that, hey, I wasn't feeling safe, and I may have said and done things that didn't really align with me at the time, but it's what I did because that's the way I felt, that's how I was at that time. And giving yourself some self-compassion around being human. That's so big for me. Like, hey, we're human, we're allowed to stuff up, like that's part of it.
Right.
That is part
Yeah.
of it. I come from, and I'm still dealing with a lot of kind of perfectionist traits where I won't even try anything, because if I'm not going to get it right the first time, then what's the point? So I'm slowly working through that, and that has been a big game changer for me. Is like, hey, you're human. You're human, and you come with flaws, and you get things wrong, and you make mistakes. Handle that with grace, and realize that that's totally normal. And I think it's not what you did, but it's how you then follow up afterwards, and how you
Absolutely.
not only treat others but treat yourself
Mm.
during that realization. Self-compassion. I think there was I do a bit of work with the ambulance. It's called peer support, and so I am like a support person that talks to people after they've been to big jobs and or distressing jobs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I went to a seminar, and I saw the quote, "Making room for suffering is a form of self-compassion," and it was like, boom.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like,
Huh.
I just need to allow space for this
Yeah.
because it's normal, you know.
Mhm.
And it did. It really clicked then, and it feels right. Felt right to do that. And we do that for kids. We do that, like when we talk about when conscious parenting, and we talk about all that kind of stuff. We talk about holding space for big emotions for our kids. Then why can't we do it for ourselves? You know, um, yeah. It was a game changer for me, and it has released so much anxiety. I'm an anxious person by nature for many reasons, but it has released a lot of anxiety. It's an ongoing process, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really has released so much anxiety for me, and made me feel a bit more comfortable in my skin. I'm being like, hey, I'm human. This is the way I'm. Cut yourself some slack.
Yeah. Have you found that that's been a big growth for you this year in particular? Because I have.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
just hugely. The more that you step into just being you and creating space for you and doing, like, what supports you first and foremost as a way of self-care, in a healthy way, that's kind of like changed the game for me this year.
Yeah. It came to me the other day. I listened to a podcast and on self care, And it came to me the other day that, self-care is self-awareness between self-compassion and accountability. And that's it. It's that sliding scale, that fluidness of being, hey, you need to pull yourself up a little bit there, or hey, cut yourself some slack. And
Yes.
it's that kind of that constant fluid state is self-care for me. I'd love it to be, the nails and the hair and all the rest of it, but that's a little on the side every now and then. But the constant state of self-care for me is really, holding myself accountable, but then also cutting myself some slack.
Yeah, it is. It's that almost that like mental and emotional state rather than anything else. Like we were
external. It's all internal for me. It's nothing external. All of the, I exercise, but that comes down to, if I don't exercise, then I need to hold myself accountable, or am I giving myself, it all comes down to that for me. And yeah, it's a constant state of.
Yeah, well, yeah, for me, exercise is self-care, because if I don't, I'm not shifting. And we kind of spoke about this before we started recording, like I'm not shifting somatically, like, and exercise helps me do that. It makes me feel more stable. So then I don't step as easily, because I start to feel that anxiety, and the anxious noise gets louder the less I exercise. So especially with like weights training, like just stuff that gives me stability physically.
I've been doing PT for the last 18 months with weights, and it's this kind of the most together I've ever felt. And it is, it's definitely a form of self-care. This morning, I put the tunes on because I've got no kids here, and I just danced. And that is such self-care for me, because it's basically asking my body what it wants and then just closing my eyes and going with it. And it really does. It's something releases when you move your body in the way that it wants to.
It's an expression. It's like it just wants to open up and express in a way rather than being held rigid.
So I am interested in, like, I'm studying counselling at uni at the moment. I've only just started, but I am interested in like body work and somatics, and that's something that does fascinate me, and how trauma is stored in the body, and ways in which we can release it, and it's something that's on my radar. I've always got lots of things on the go.
Yeah, it's a really powerful, it's one that I've always really known, but like, because I've, studied trauma to an extent as well, and it does live in the body, but it's also for just humans who have like, other versions of trauma as well. And in the last month or two, like I've hired a coach who's very into like the somatic body work and just clearing stuff through movement. And I feel like that's even changed it for me, because it's like I've just felt more even joy because of that shifting of just being able to be comfortable in myself and learn to be comfortable in myself, feeling all the things, but still being able to move rather than being in that free state, I guess.
Breath work has been big for me, to shift myself into the relaxed state and really come down into my body. I'm up a lot, and I get quite anxious, and then I tense up. And so breath work for me has been really integral in getting back down into my body and feeling safe in my body, and activating that parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
We all need a little bit more of.
Definitely. And I think when we are able to do little things that make us feel safer and be in like wherever we are able to, whenever we're able to, in environments that make us feel safe. And again, that's more challenging for some people than it is for others. Sometimes nothing feels safe depending on what's going on, but it's where if we're able to take even the little steps, like the tiny little things that give us even just a little bit of that feeling of safety, it can actually change everything for us.
I remember back when I first had my kids, and I thought, okay, I'm not eating right, and I'm not like all these things, I'm doing all these things. But all of those things that I thought were bad were actually keeping me safe, and I was surviving. And so I wanted to change, but I soon realized that you can't just take all those things away without implementing some other things. And it really does happen one by one and little by little. You can't overhaul your life in, you know, a week, a month, a year. It needs to happen slowly over time. And it is like exactly what you said, just those little things that you can change. And it's not even about changing, it might be adding something in, and then letting other stuff fall away slowly. And I think that's what's helped me, is just adding things in slowly, and then the other stuff just seems to fall away. You don't then have to try so hard, because I was thinking, okay, I was trying so hard and I couldn't stick to certain, you know, I couldn't meditate every day. I couldn't stay away from the chocolate, or, you know, and I was just thinking, like, just implement little bits at a time. And that's what helped me. And then other stuff is, it's fallen away. I actually look forward to meditation now, because I've slowly brought it in, and I've listened to my body, and I've decided when feels safe for me to do it. And I think, that's a really important point, is that you said, is that, just adding things in slowly.
Yeah. Oh, I could keep going forever, but thank you so much for joining. If there's one last, I mean, there's so much goodness in that conversation and what you've had to share already anyway, but if there's one last piece that you could leave people with, that, or whether it's around mental health and taking care of yourself, or around conscious parenting, or shadow work, or social justice, or how to approach that for them, what, I haven't really helped you there with narrowing it down, but what might that be that comes to mind in this moment?
What comes to mind is that be gentle with yourself. You can hold yourself accountable and be gentle with yourself. You know, that's those two truths. Realizing that you are human, and whatever you're going through, mental health, working with, you know, any type of situation you're going through, is cut yourself some slack, be gentle, you're only human. And it's about, like I said, holding yourself accountable, but also giving yourself some self-compassion, and just doing your best. And that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm trying to do. I don't always get it right, and I'm okay with that, I think.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
So. It is. It's just being okay with, just as long as, like, just doing your best and being okay with that.
I have my own morals and integrity that I stick by, and as long as I feel comfortable within that, then it gives me a little bit of room back and forth to find out, to work through things. And I think as long as you find that space within yourself and what feels right, and just be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
Especially now.
Exactly.
With yourself and others, I should probably say, be gentle with yourself and others.
Yeah, and that it is a sliding scale as well. Like, even in the coaching world, we talk about, you know, like, sometimes someone will need accountability and a little bit of, like, tough love almost, and sometimes they need the gentleness. And I know it's the same in, like, the therapy world and the counseling world. My therapist is very good at that as well. She, like, you'll walk in and she just picks up, she's like, so let's be gentle today. I'm like, great. Awesome. Exactly what I needed. And all the time she's like, so what about this? I'm like, okay.
You're calling me out. You're calling me out.
Let's do this.
Sometimes people need that as well. So
Exactly. And I walk out feeling like, like I cleared some shit. So it was good. Cool. Well, is there somewhere that people can find and follow you to maybe just learn more, as far as, like, you know, by you going through your process, it sets the example for others. So is there anywhere that is suitable for that?
Absolutely. So obviously my social media, which is Shears of the Earth, is where I share most of my daily thoughts and whatever's coming up for me. I'm also starting a new project called Shadow Dancers, which is a space for people to share their suffering. And also I'm hoping that we can find out what people need. And it's kind of a space where I want to highlight that we have needs during suffering, and that also how to articulate that, and how to hold space for others. So that's something I'm working on as well.
I love that. I'll include them in the caption and the show notes and everything as well. But yeah, I definitely recommend following Carly, because there's so many things that you share, especially even in your stories, that always make me go like, oh, okay. And I definitely have the moments where I'm like, oh, I need to sit with this, because, you know, like, that's confronting, not necessarily disagreeing, just like the recognition of, oh, that's different. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I'll sit
also
with that.
disagreeing is fine too, because
Yeah.
we're also very different. So what works
But
for me.
it's a really useful learning in the sense of understanding that people are different, and it feels like a safe space for that. So I highly recommend everyone following Carly. My pleasure. But thank you so much for your time. I really love this conversation. It was probably really helpful for me to have anyway. So I feel like there was a lot in there that people can take away that's useful for them
Thank
as well.
you.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.